Most Americans do not want a rematch between Biden and Trump. The first party to retire its 80-year-old candidate is going to be the party that wins this election. And I think it should be the Republicans that win this election.
That was Nikki Haley last night in New Hampshire after losing to President Trump in the first in the nation primary. Joe Biden and the Democrats, a little bit of chicanery on their part, as you might expect. And now, let's dance. Red shoes. Put on your red shoes. Dance the blues, all that stuff. Well, happy Wednesday to you, and welcome back. Always a rough day in the Clinton household. Hump day, Hillary's got to get out of the house because, the Energizer might be coming over. Bill Clinton. Hillary waking up face down in a pool of her own dried vomit once again. Very sad. What might have been, what might have been. Empty 1-gallon cardboard box of cheap New Zealand Chardonnay next to her. The Secret Service shaking their heads once again. And there's a lot to get to, and I want to start getting to some of it right away. We've got Joe Biden gave a speech yesterday. It was an abortion speech, pro-abortion, very enthusiastically pro-abortion. They love abortion. Played that amazing audio yesterday from NBC fake news and stuff. High school girls who were choosing their colleges based on whether they can get 10 or 12 abortions while they're in college. And mom, we had the mom yesterday kind of said, well, I guess, she's thinking about the weather where you go to college and the dorm rooms, but my daughter's thinking about getting abortions in college, and the Democrats love that. You are aware of birth control, just because, the patriarchy has provided all manner of birth control. Take your choice. There is a long menu of birth control options. You can go ahead and look that up on the internet, probably. The Democrats would tell you they don't have access to the internet. We have to provide free, high-speed internet access to everyone because slavery, something like that. The Democrat Party, the party of slavery. But let me get into what happened yesterday in New Hampshire because it is there are a number of interesting elements. President Trump, of course, won handily because that is what President Trump does, and he won Iowa, right? President Trump did, and now he won New Hampshire. And there's kind of an interesting footnote on that. He's the first Republican nominee to win Iowa and New Hampshire since 1976. Since 1976. That's a long time ago. Joe Biden was only ready for retirement then in 1976, but paying no attention to that. President Trump, the first to win Iowa and New Hampshire since 1976. That's pretty interesting stuff, I've got to say. And I've got an update on the border terrorists, our southern border terrorists too. But let me get to yesterday in New Hampshire. And here's the radical left-wingers at Mediaite, very excited. Biden destroying long-shot challengers in New Hampshire, and he's not even on the ballot. This is the headline from the radical left-wing extremists at the Mediaite. And no, but he is the president of the United States living in the Oval Office, or living in the White House and working in the Oval Office, and wearing pajamas, and he has porridge on his chin, and he never misses an episode of Hazel because he loves that Shirley Booth. But never mind that. Biden destroying long-shot challengers. Yeah, who are the other challengers? Does anybody know? Got this Dean Phillips guy, and I've got some audio for you today of him as well, because he said a couple of interesting things. Now, President Joe Biden is destroying his long-shot challengers in New Hampshire's Democratic primary. They're not having a Democratic primary in New Hampshire. So Mediaite lies in their opening sentence, where he's not even on the ballot. That's because they're really not having a primary, and he's not recognizing it because race. and South Carolina. And that's the actual true answer to that question. The president was taken off the ballot in New Hampshire due to the state's defiance of the Democratic National Committee's decision to move South Carolina up to be the first in the nation Democratic primary, rendering the New Hampshire contest effectively moot. The question is moot. See, you got that going. Leading challengers, Representative Dean Phillips, a Democrat from Minnesota. He's in the House of Representatives. And Marianne Williamson. Sure, Marianne Williamson's going to do real well there. Who? Never mind. Is she the one who's a friend of Oprah? That's her claim to fame? She's a friend of Oprah? That's good enough. You know, Donald Trump used to be a friend of Oprah. Then Donald Trump said he's a Republican. And then the billionaires with the $50,000 a month water bill in Montecito for a mansion that she does not live in, but never mind that. It's good to be a Democrat. So Marianne Williamson had hoped that Biden being left off the ballot could result in some sort of momentum-shifting victory or a moment for them. But that does not appear to be in the cards. In fact, the story says it does not appears to be in the cards because no one knows how to write anymore. And we got that. So the Democrats, they had their little dog and pony show, and they had a very well-organized and orchestrated write-in campaign for Joe Biden, who amazingly continues to be the president of the United States, at least for the time being. And Joe Biden got 62.8% of the vote. This guy, Dean Phillips, and I'm going to play audio today of Dean Phillips, got 19.8, call it 20% of the vote. So Joe Biden was 62.8, and Dean Phillips with 19%. Marianne Williamson amazingly got 4.7% of the vote. How did that happen? But of course, President Trump got 54%, 54.5% of the vote, and Nikki Haley got 43.2% of the vote. But there's an asterisk next to this that the media will not use, but I'll explain why there's an asterisk next to the Nikki Haley number. It's because the Democrats rigged the system. They monkey-wrenched the system as a verb. They corrupted the process of the Republican primary, which is an actual primary in New Hampshire, because we're normal and they're all too often abnormal. Now, the New Hampshire Republicans were polled extensively, and they asked Republican voters, well, what would you say is very important? 95% said that the president is mentally fit, which Joe Biden clearly is not. 85% said a strong leader. Sounds like a good idea. 76% said policies are important. That should matter. 75% said can win, that they can win, right? And that's pretty important too, I've got to say. And among New Hampshire Republicans, is building a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border important? 61% said they strongly support, strongly favor. 18% say they somewhat favor. So what is that now? That's 80-something percent. Let's say 71, and 79% are in favor of a wall. And 10% say they somewhat oppose. 10% of Republicans say they strongly oppose building a wall along the border. 10%. That's interesting enough. Most important issue for Republicans in New Hampshire, number one is immigration. Number two is the economy and jobs. Number three, foreign policy, and for 5% say abortion, interestingly enough. But immigration is it was the big in Iowa, the big issue in Iowa. It's the big issue in New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a border state. They border Canada, and they too are feeling the wrath of the tsunami, the open border under Joe Biden and the Democrats. Just amazing stuff. Now let's get to audio. I'm going to go to CNN audio because it demonstrates a truth, even though it was not their objective on CNN. The CNN people in, because you can be an independent, registered independent, so you're not a Republican, and vote in the Republican primary. And that's how the Democrats monkey wrench the system. They come in and they vote in large numbers for Nikki Haley. They do that to drive Donald Trump's numbers down, tried to get a win for Nikki Haley and a loss for Donald Trump. It failed miserably, but it doesn't matter because they're political fanatics. They're political fanatics everywhere. Let's go to soundbite number 7. CNN last night, very revealing, though not intentionally.
About how the rest of the night might play out. Let's go back to David Chalian with that. And David, you're getting more on the ways that Republican primary voters don't see eye to eye?
Yes, that's right, Jake. In these exit poll results, you see a Mars and Venus universe for Haley and Trump coalitions here. Take a look at the numbers. Among Trump voters, 70% of them, according to our exit polls, are registered Republicans. Donald Trump, his support, 27% of his voters are registered undeclareds or independents. 3% were unregistered before today. Look at how that compares with Nikki Haley. It's a complete reversal. It's an alternate universe. Among Haley voters, 70% are registered undeclareds. Only 27% are registered Republicans.
What does that tell us now? And this David Chalian, he was fired from a job for smearing and slandering Mitt Romney years ago, and then CNN hired him because they like the cut of his corrupt jib. He's not a journalist. He's a silly Democrat. Now, wait a minute. Because about 30% of voters in New Hampshire are registered as independents. It's an independent state. They have great traditions, great political traditions. And the quadrennial, that is to say, every 4-year New Hampshire primary has always been a great American political tradition, which the Democrats and the media, but I repeat myself, are now corrupting and trashing and turning upside down. But what did we just learn from the nefarious David Chalian? 70% of President Trump's voters are registered Republicans, 27% registered as independents. Now, that about matches the balance of registered voters in New Hampshire. Then you go to Nikki Haley. 70% of the votes that she got were from independents. That is to say, a great many of those, it's hard to say what the percentages are, but a great many of those are in fact Democrats who register as independents, who come in to vote in the Republican primary to create Operation Chaos, as the great Rush Limbaugh termed it, and only about 20-something% are actually registered Republicans that voted for Nikki Haley. So what you have here is the Democrats tampering with the primary system, okay? It's upside down, the numbers, and they're laughing at CNN because they're not going to say it out loud, but they recognize what this is Democrats meddling with, tampering with the primary in New Hampshire. Again, Nikki Haley with 43.2% of the vote, 129,000 votes. Donald Trump with 54.5% of the vote, 163,700 votes. But it looks like that up to 70% of the Nikki Haley voters as independents may in fact be Democrats, not Republicans registered, normally Republican voters registered as independents, but some of them, no doubt. And so that is the Democrats tampering with the system, with the primary, and trying to get a loss for Donald Trump, or at least minimize his numbers. But make no mistake, the asterisk next to this is because the Democrats were tampering. CNN last night.
And why did you vote for Nikki Haley?
It's a vote against Trump.
Listen to this.
I think it would be better to have her against Biden in the elections than it would be Trump and her.
Do you consider yourself generally independent, Republican, or Democrat?
Democrat.
So when you undeclared, you voted for Nikki Haley. If it was Nikki Haley against Joe Biden in a general election, who are you voting for?
Joe Biden.
What more do you need to know? This is the Democrat Party tampering in our system by dishonestly registering so they can vote in the other guy's primary, so that they can tamper with and meddle in the other guy's primary, because they're monkey wrenching the whole operation. because, democracy is under threat. Well, here's an example of democracy being under threat. Well, of course, I'm a Joe Biden voter, but I registered as an independent, so I could vote in the Republican primary, so I could vote for, it's a vote against Trump. And this is corruption. No question about it. And it's the Democrats. And the news media laughs about it and then doesn't talk about it. Hey, it's Chris Plant, excited to tell you about our July 2024 Listener Sea Cruise. We'll be sailing around the British Isles, visiting Scotland and Ireland. Please join us. Visit ChrisPlantCruise.com. I've got more, and I've got all kinds. I've got President Trump and Nikki Haley and Joe Biden trying to speak yesterday. Provided us with all kinds of hilarity. That's coming up. And mental illness. I think illness. But let's take another phone call, Michael. Let's go to Robert calling from McCormick, South Carolina, Nikki Haley's home state. Robert, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, good morning, Chris. Thanks for your show.
You betcha.
Hey, listen, just a quick question for you. Not a mathematician here, but I'm calling about Coos or Coos County, Dixville. It sounds appropriately named. Anyway, gave their 6 delegates to Nikki Haley, and I'm looking at the math up on the board. Looks like Trump won about 4,700 votes and Nikki Haley won about 3,000. I'm trying to figure out if you can comment on how they did the math and how the delegates went to Trump.
Well, Dixville Notch is a little, just a tiny little town, not the county-wide. And this tradition started not too terribly long ago, I think the 1960s, where Dixville Notch would vote first because it's a long drive to get other polling places, so they created their own. And only 6 people voted in Dixville Notch, right? A couple of nights ago, night before last. And Nikki Haley won all 6 votes. But then you say you looked at the county numbers where Dixville Notch is found, and President Trump won very handily county-wide, right?
I think 60%, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's plenty. And also you got to be looking out for the Democrats, because as I was just talking about and CNN accidentally revealed, President Trump, 70% of the President Trump voters are registered Republicans. 70% of Nikki Haley voters are registered independents. I'm making quotation marks with my fingers, because we know that,
imagine that,
lots and lots of Democrats sign up as independents so they can vote in the Republican primary, not because they want to vote Republican. In fact, we've got more. We've got all kinds of people there who are admitting, oh no, I'm a Democrat, but I voted in the Republican primary. And they're doing it not because their eyes have been opened, they're suddenly pro-American. It's because the Democrats have convinced them to mess with the system.
For Nikki Haley because I was voting against Donald Trump.
And what propelled you to get to this point?
I'm 74 years old. I've lived in a constitutional democracy all my life. I want to remain that way, and I want my grandchildren to grow up in one, not a dictatorship.
Yes, the Democrat Party issued talking points. She doesn't want to live in a dictatorship. Well, then you shouldn't want to live in Joe Biden's America. Donald Trump was president for 4 years. Can you name anything dictatorial about his 4 years as president of the United States? That was CNN talking to, what'd she say, a 74-year-old woman. She's lived in a constitutional democracy all her life and a constitutional republic. But let's not get caught up in terminological exactitude. And she wants her grandchildren to grow up that way, too. I guess in a country where the FBI is used against the political enemies of the party in power, and the Justice Department is rolled out to indict the political enemies and try to strip their name off of the ballots like they do in Senegal, as I explained yesterday. Happening right now in Senegal, the 2 main minority leaders have been stripped from the ballot for their upcoming election, which is what the Democrats are doing here where they can in how many? 7 different states or so. and Hawaii adding themselves to the list. But she voted for Haley to vote against Trump because she doesn't want to live in a dictatorship, and she wants to live in a constitutional democracy. I think she means republic. And that's why she voted for Haley. She's a Democrat. They didn't ask the follow-up question, who are you going to vote for in the general election? It's going to be Joe Biden. That's the correct answer. Then MSDNC, that was CNN, MSDNC speaking to Democrat voters who went and voted in the Republican primary to monkey wrench the system. And this one was a man, probably still is, a man named Christian Smith, who explained to MSDNC what his thinking was.
Christian, who did you vote for and why?
Yeah, so thank you. I voted for Nikki Haley, and it was certainly a strategic vote. I think the DNC is fairly resolute in their nomination for Joe Biden. And while I wouldn't vote for her in a general election, particularly on our differences with climate change solution, a woman's right to bodily autonomy, or incarceration rates, I think a vote for Nikki Haley helps diminish Trump's influence in the RNC and their nomination, but is also a vote towards democracy.
And Christian is emblematic of so many conversations that I've had here throughout the day.
So many MSDNC, so many Democrats voting in the Republican primary for Nikki Haley because, you know, what bodily autonomy, is that what it is about? And climate change and bodily, that's why he would never vote for Nikki Haley, because she, as a woman of color, racist, misogynist that Christian Smith is, he would vote for bodily autonomy for women up until the moment of birth, no doubt, but that didn't come up. And, of course, climate, because the Democrats are going to make the climate better. That's what they claim, and Christian Smith believes them. He must have gone to Harvard. Must be an anti-Semite as well. Pretty amazing stuff. But it was bodily autonomy and the climate, and what was the third? Incarceration. Oh, yeah, incarceration rates. See, he wants more criminals on the street. He's definitely a Democrat. Incarceration rates are too high. I think the homicide rate is too high. I think the carjacking rate is too high. I think people getting shot, and surviving, too high. I think that looting has become too commonplace. Theft, stores closing down all over the place, fleeing big Democrat-run cities all over the country. I think those numbers are too high. And, let's say, honestly, Christian Smith, you're presumably a man, hard to say from here. It's the radio, But some of their women are men now, and they win golf tournaments, and some of that's their men who are women, or is that who they're women who are men? It's really a semantic thing more than anything. But they say your genitals don't define your gender, but removing your genitals will affirm your gender. Okay. They use the words, but they don't know what they mean.
I wouldn't vote for her in a general election, particularly on our differences with climate change solution, a woman's right to bodily autonomy, or incarceration rates.
Climate change solutions. What are those solutions? Oh, well, in Chicago, they've got a solution. They're doing real good in Chicago. In Chicago, they are looking at legislation banning, this is their latest thing, CBS News, Chicago City Council to weigh ordinance effectively banning natural gas in new buildings. This is Chicago. The other day, it was 27 degrees below zero. No gas. Hey, and they got rolling blackouts in California already, and they're not building new power plants. Coal burning, nuclear, hydroelectric. The Democrat Party is against all known forms of energy production. They're for expensive gas, so you'll drive less. Right? And no gas. Where heat is good in the wintertime in Chicago, I can assure you. And since the Democrats are delivering rolling blackouts, even in California, where it's comparatively warm, how do you think that's going to go in Chicago? No gas heat. Last resort, you turn your oven on in Chicago in the wintertime, and everybody stays alive. You don't freeze to death. But now the Democrats in Chicago, they're looking at a new ordinance effectively banning natural gas in new buildings. That ought to do it. Because Democrats. Yeah, so the news media actually found all these people that are Democrats registering as independents that voted for Nikki Haley to drive President Trump's numbers down, to try to deliver a defeat unto him. And they failed, but the media is giggling about it and touching themselves, as they very often do. Pretty amazing stuff. All right, now let's get to more audio of, we got Nikki Haley and President Trump. And then I want to get to Joe Biden because he speechified yesterday at the pro-abortion rally, pro-death, anti-life rally. So let's go to Nikki Haley last night in New Hampshire, where she's talking about her relative youth, Nikki Haley. And now Donald Trump is older, and obviously Joe Biden is Methuselah. He's as old as it gets.
I've long called for mental competency tests for politicians over the age of 75.
Woo!
Trump claims he'd do better than me in one of those tests. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But if he thinks that, then he should have no problem standing on a debate stage with me.
Sure, she wants to debate Donald Trump. It would elevate her stature and her status and her standing. She's 52 years old, by the way. And, cognitive tests. Well, Joe Biden certainly should. Remember, President Trump was forced by the corrupt news media to take a cognitive test when he was president, and he passed with flying colors, and then they attacked him for it after they forced him into it. Remember, they said he misidentified a giraffe as a zebra or something on MSDNC because they make things up all the time. On the other hand, Joe Biden, who's obviously in cognitive decline, he has refused steadfastly to take a mental test, a cognitive test, and the news media is with him on that. But never mind all that. So Nikki Haley last night at the age of 52 saying, yeah, if you're over 75, you should have to take a cognitive test, drawing attention to, putting the spotlight on her relative youth and the relative maturity of Donald Trump and the decrepit state of Joe Biden. Nikki Haley last night, again, on the age issue.
Most Americans do not want a rematch between Biden and Trump. The first party to retire its 80-year-old candidate is going to be the party that wins this election.
I don't think that's true.
It should be the Republicans that win this election.
Well, honestly, if the Democrats win again, we're in pretty deep. Donald Trump is, we're already in deep. Donald Trump is 77 years old, and Joe Biden is 81 now, right? 81. So if Donald Trump were to assume the presidency right now, 4 years from now, he'd be as old as Joe Biden is now. The day that Joe Biden was inaugurated, he was older than Ronald Reagan was the day that Ronald Reagan left office after 8 years in office. And it's worth noting, and I'm going to make mention of this a little bit later on too, it's worth noting that Joe Biden, the day that Joe Biden was born, because he brought up the Civil War again last night, yesterday, and they always fail to mention that they were the Confederacy. It's interesting they never bring that up. And it's interesting that the Republicans never bring that up either, even though the Democrats love to bring up ancient history, but never mind that. The day that Joe Biden was born, he was born long ago. Joe Biden's birth date, his date of birth, is actually closer on the calendar to Abraham Lincoln's second inauguration than his birth date is to his own inauguration. That's an amazing statistic, isn't it? That should be brought up by the Republicans every day on the campaign trail. Nikki Haley last night, whipping out, it's a popular word last few days, coronation. This happens a lot at election time. Oh, you're just going to coronate your person. There is no competition. Nikki Haley last night saying Donald Trump's going to be coronated by the like a royal member of the royal becoming king. We just had the coronation of Prince Chuck. Now he's King Chuck over there in England. Merry old England. Nikki Haley last night.
Every time I've run for office in South Carolina, I've beaten the political establishment. They're lined up against me again. That's no surprise. But South Carolina voters don't want a coronation. They want an election.
Don't want a coronation. They want an election. Don't want a coronation. They want an election. I don't want a coronation. I want an election. I'm in favor of an election. And I thought it was interesting she used the word coronation because the Democrat, who is a member of the House of Representatives from Minnesota, also yesterday used the word coronation, talking about the Democrats coronating Joe Biden without a competition, and that's, of course, true.
At least give voters a choice. Neither party should be pursuing a coronation. That's what mine is right now. I think that's dangerous. Our country was founded on competition.
Our country was founded on competition and shouldn't have a coronation. Nikki Haley saying the Republicans shouldn't coronate President Trump. I don't think this is a coronation of Trump. Dean Phillips running against Joe Biden as a Democrat, member of the House of Representatives, wants to be president, thinks that Joe Biden is not so great. And the 55-year-old multimillionaire from St. Paul, Minneapolis, Dean Phillips, kind of an interesting story for a number of reasons, I suppose, and nobody's paid any attention to him with very good reason ever before. But he was born Dean Pfeffer, P-F, like Pfeffer, P-F-E-F-E-R is his real last name. He's 55 years old. He is, I guess, worth about $80 million. And he's been very successful. And now he's thinking, well, Joe Biden's too old. And I want to share something with you because this was kind of fun. Dean Phillips was talking to CNN, and he explained that there was a group of Trump supporters there in New Hampshire lined up, and he went over to say hello to them, number 16, went over to say hello to them, and you'll never guess what happened. Hi, I'm Democrat Dean Phillips. I'm running for president.
And I got to tell you guys, I went to a Donald Trump rally a couple nights ago. Never been to one. I had an event across the street. I saw the line of people waiting in the cold for hours. And I thought, what the heck? You know, I'm going to be a leader who actually invites people, doesn't condemn them. Met probably 50 Trump people waiting in line. Every single one of them, thoughtful, hospitable, friendly. All of them so frustrated that they feel nobody's listening to them but Donald Trump. A diverse crowd, people who had never been to a Trump event before. My party is completely delusional right now.
My party is completely delusional right now. And the thoughtful, polite, hospitable, frustrated that nobody in politics is actually listening to them. And then Dean Phillips, after that was CNN, and they were slack-jawed. They didn't know what to say. They were horrified that he just said that on CNN. Then Dean Phillips was on Fox News talking to Bret Baier later in the day. And Bret Baier said, hey, I hear you went to a Trump rally. Is that right?
I'm going to show them how I lead, which is to run to the fire. I didn't expect to be treated nicely, to be honest with you. But my goodness, I'll never forget it. 50 people I spoke to, hospitable, friendly, kind, a lot of high fives, a lot of statements of glad you're in this race, showing some courage. And I got to tell you, a diverse crowd, many of them there for the first time.
Diverse. That's a Democrat keyword, of course. Yeah. That's Dean Phillips. He sounded like Democrats used to sound before Obama came along and radicalized the party to the point where they just scream in your face that you're a racist and a fascist and a Nazi while they exterminate 40% of the black population in the womb, incarcerate 40% after they get kicked out of high school, and the Democrat Party's school-to-prison pipeline, and, of course, the drug overdoses and the crime and the mayhem. Yeah, the Democrats are doing a great job. That's right, they're diverse, the Trump crowd, which is true, of course. Thoughtful, hospitable, friendly, kind. He didn't expect that. Neither did CNN. When he said it on CNN, they're like, okay, we're done here. We're out of here. We've had enough of him. Stop talking to Dean Phillips. Let's I've got Joe Biden coming up, some pretty amazing Joe Biden stuff. His brain, she's a broke. She is a no good, that brain of his. And the communists, like Van Jones, on what Joe Biden should be doing for his presidential campaign. I have that coming up as well. Let's go, in the meantime, to Sonny calling from Chicago and the great WLS. Sonny, you're on the Chris Plante Show.
Chris, great to hear you today. Listen, I was just watching on Washington Journal C-SPAN and people calling in from all over the country, and so many people seem to be misinformed or just not facing the facts or the truth or researching whatever they're hearing. And all I'm hearing is how Donald Trump is guilty automatically, which hasn't been prosecuted of anything yet. And all the court, he has to keep going to court, and which is of course, trying to keep him from running.
Right.
And these people just do not believe that. They just believe that he's guilty already, and not even giving him an opportunity to say his piece or, explain what situation or he's been in or what he's going to court for.
Right.
And I think that's truly wrong.
Yeah, well, that's because you have American values, and the left does not share your values of innocent until proven guilty, which is a bedrock American value. And the left is a lynch mob, and the Democrat Party is the party of lynching and the party of the Confederate States and the KKK. And they're not the party of law and order. Look at the Biden family. Most corrupt family ever to live in the White House, I hope and I assume. But, a lot of people are misinformed. It reminds, look, this is a problem, Sonny, I think, with the corrupt news media. When Barack Obama says, this is the moment the rise of the oceans begins to slow, and the media, they applaud and they say, yeah, Barack Obama will slow the rise of the oceans. And they say, Trump's a dictator. And you got Democrats repeating that back in New Hampshire. He was already president for 4 years. He wasn't a dictator. Joe Biden, we got, vaccine mandates for government employees, dictator.